It's interesting that you say that 2012 was only mentioned once. Is there any other date, perhaps one that we've even passed, that was really predominant in the writings from the Mayan that kind of passed and didn't fulfill any major prophecy?
Well, a lot of scholars like to point out that of all the important prophecies the Maya made, and they made several sort of castings in the future, they missed the conquest of Spain. I mean, they missed the Spanish coming here. They never mentioned that. And if they're such great prophets, why didn't they get that?
Yeah.
You know? But also, what they predicted on that date, that 4772 date at Palenque, they predicted two things. One is that the 20th Baktun would end, which tells us that the clock does not reset at 13, it goes to 14 and 15 and 16. And that the event that it's on that date is an anniversary of King Pakal's crowning. So they expected the status quo to continue. They expected time to go on and not to change back to 1 or 2 or 3, but to go up to 20. And they expected that people would still be behaving the same way that they're behaving 4,000 years earlier in their own time.
Now, when you're looking at the way the Maya concepts are constructed, and the way we've been socialized in terms of Western thinking, is there any significant inference that we can take from the inscriptions that you have? Are we just clutching at straws to try and bring something into, into our existence that will, somehow draw a line that will mean something to us?
Well, I always, when asked about, things like this, it made me reflect a little while ago on the gentleman, Victor, that did his interview before we did. And that is that, there are a lot of things that we can learn from the past. And it can help us avoid some of the same mistakes from the past. And I think that we're fortunate that, right here in Belize, we had this amazing civilization that was very successful, indeed, for 2,000 years. I think about places like Cajalpech, occupied from around 1200 BC and still going right up to 900 AD. How old is Belize, modern Belize? Maybe 300 years, if. And so, we can learn a lot. Maya civilization was one of the greatest civilizations on Earth. So, one of the things that I always look at, I feel proud, at the fact that here in this country we had, these people who were using a system of writing, using mathematics, using calendrics, etc., before the birth of Christ. And so, I think these are things to be proud of. And yes, every once in a while we run into situations where, there is some sort of, misunderstanding of certain Maya concepts. But that makes it exciting, I guess.
Yeah.
Now, I'd like to point out that probably the reason that the Maya collapsed was that they destroyed their environment. I mean, there's a very important lesson here for us, that they cut down too many trees, they put too many people on the land, that they reach the carrying capacity. And as long as things are great, if you're just on the carrying capacity of the land, that's okay. But if we have a drought, which they did, suddenly people starve. And they push the environment beyond its limits. And hey, guess what we're doing now?
So we're still learning, or we still have a lot to learn from them. Now, I suppose the reason why the idea of being able to believe that there is a prophecy for 2012 is that the Mayans were so suspicious, and even things like moving or changing locations or having these major droughts, they were always tied to something with one of the gods, or that their actions caused the reaction. Is there any sort of similar line tied into this time of the year, the end of the calendar, the end of this particular time, that leads to even more speculation for the 2012 theory?
I believe that most of the speculation is projected on the Maya because they're mysterious. This is the here be dragons phenomenon, where you have a part of the map, you don't know what's, you have a blank spot on your map, and this is where you put all of your fantasies. And people have always done that.
Yeah. Now, the good part about it is that it obviously brings the Mayan and their culture to the forefront, looking at both the historical aspect and also, of course, looking at where they are today. Both of you have done extensive research in this particular area. What does it mean for you individually? Obviously, you have your publication specifically on 2012. That's one aspect.
Making lots of money.
Yeah.
I think that I wrote this book because I wanted to spotlight the Maya. They're so little known about them, and they're so underappreciated that I'm really excited that people are starting to look at this culture and look at how amazing and wonderful they were.
Yeah.
I would have to echo what Mark said. I've been on your show several times, and people always ask me, how come you're so passionate about this and excited? Well, because I feel very fortunate to have this opportunity to learn about this, like I said, this incredible civilization that made Belize their home, just like we make Belize our home, and I feel very proud of that fact. And so whatever I can do to learn more about this, this culture, and to be able to then teach other Belizeans about it, for me, you couldn't have a much better, profession.
Yeah.
But again, what I don't know if one of your questions is what are we doing about this? Well, as you can see, you talked about how a lot of folks, are sort of doing a lot of hoopah and all that. You can see this is a publication that just came out by the American Archaeology magazine, and it's called The Myth of 2012.
Yeah, there's no guessing there. The myth.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what's neat about this issue, though, is that on the cover page, it's Shenantonich. It's the stucco frieze at Shenantonich. Yeah. So again, they could have picked images from Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, but Belize got selected for the front cover of this magazine.
Yeah.
So again, showing some of the things that we have right here in this country.
Now, when you look at the history of the Maya, even within Belize, it's something that it's very limited in terms of what we teach in our schools, etc. And a lot of it comes through television and hype and that kind of thing. What our construct is. What do you think 2012 will do in terms of shaping the real picture when it comes to Maya and their history and their importance in Mesoamerica?
Well, I think, as Mark said, one of the reasons why he decided to write his book was because there were so many questions out there. Is 2012 a myth? Well, 2012 is not a myth, and yes, it is a myth. It's both. What's not a myth is that, yes, the Maya did, in their calendar, they did indicate that this backbone will end and another one will begin. That's accurate. Is it going to be the end of the world? No. Having said that, should we use this opportunity to highlight Maya culture? And the answer is yes. You guys remember, William, you in particular, you and I, when we went to school, we never learned about the Maya. In fact, we learned about British and European history, about Caribbean history, and so we're hoping that these kinds of events will make people realize the need for more instruction on our own past in the school system, in the curriculum. And as a result, at NICH and at the Ministry of Tourism, we decided to develop an initiative. We call it the 2012 Initiative, where we will be celebrating this important passage of time to the Maya by having monthly events, which will be authentic and unique, but that will serve to highlight Maya culture and civilization in Belize.
Now, you're talking about there have been initiatives to do African and Maya history in schools. And in the conversation that we had earlier too, one of the things that seems to be a real challenge for us is that a lot of the history that we were taught is shifting in terms of new truths. How does that impact the whole, not only our history and the way we see ourselves, but also the way we see the Maya, because you still have this concept of people saying, oh, they were primitive, they were this, they were that. Should we put value on this? They're just another group of people, that kind of thing. What's your take on the whole rewriting of history to make it more correct?
Well, it's about scientific research. I'll give you a good example. I think that's healthy, right? I think that sometimes when we think that because something is written down that it's got to be the gospel truth, then we are entering dangerous ground, because what we do is we limit ourselves from learning more. I'll give you an example.
The world is flat.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Or medical science, right? We think, nothing is more exact than medicine. Well, what has happened in medicine? In the past they used to think, well, this is what caused this disease, etc. Remember the Black Plague, etc. Eventually,
Are things were incurable?
yes. Eventually, people learned, you know what? No. It's because of certain germs in the in the environment that or you get a cold by not washing your hands, and these kinds of developments, or like you said, that certain types of diseases were not curable 50 years ago, 100 years ago, but thankfully, because people kept doing research, we're getting closer to the truth. And I think it's the same with history. Some things are solid and some things won't change. The fact that Belize was a colony of Great Britain, that won't change. That fact is solid. But the details of the relationships that existed between, let's say, the British and Belize, as you saw from the previous presentation, there are some changes.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I think as we go further into history, we're able to understand more as to how things came about, whether or not they were documented that way. And I think one of the things that when we talk about, especially the Maya history, it is now coming as almost new information to some people. People who were never interested or probably never knew about the history of the Maya are now interested in it just because of this particular theory. What do you hope will be the main information that people are able to get out of this particular time and the hype and whatnot?
Well, I hope that it means that that we gain a greater appreciation for the great intellectual achievements of these indigenous peoples. I mean, when I teach art history, I have a book with 20 chapters, and 19 chapters are devoted to white people, and one chapter is devoted to the rest of the world. And there's a very rich wealth of culture and respect that we should give to those cultures that, hopefully we become more diverse. I wanted to point out, I forgot to mention before, that one of the reasons that the Maya are considered to be these great prophets is because they had a number system that allowed them to count billions of things, billions of days, billions of years, which other ancient cultures did not. The Romans, the Greeks, the Jewish in the Bible, they can only count to 1,000. They didn't have a number system that easily dealt with larger numbers, whereas the Maya could count an event 32 million years, 647,227 years and 27 days in the past, and they would specify what day of the week it would be. Nobody else on earth could do that except the Babylonians, and the Babylonians had other issues.
Yeah.
This alone made their mathematics unique in the world. And mind you, most of their mathematics they devoted to numerology. They, mathematics was to them an aspect of religion, and their astronomy was just related to astrology. I think it's important to understand that for them, every day of the week had a personality, and every day of the month had a personality. And I mean a personality of, 8 is the maize god, and 4 is the sun god, and 10 is the death god. They had a very different concept of everything, and we shouldn't mix up or project our own Western stuff onto them. And I just hope that the Maya in particular, but also the other cultures that have contributed so much to Belize and to the world, would be given a little more respect.
Yeah, yeah. I saw you chuckling a bit when William made mention of the Mayans as primitive, but because that has been for so long the way people think of them, and it's interesting that people give so much emphasis now to their calendar and the supposed end of it. Is that a part of the education that you try to do as well? Perhaps allow people to understand how their days were counted, why there is a long calendar, and why it has that specific end at that time?
Sure. I think it's really important to point out that the Maya were Stone Age people. They didn't have metal. They didn't have a lot of our modern conveniences. They didn't have antibiotics, and yet they prevailed and survived in this hostile environment. I mean, Lord knows, you go out on a hot day in the jungle and you're eaten by bugs, and imagine living like that your entire life without our modern civilization. I try to remind my students that people in ancient times were not dumber than we are. They were smarter than we are. They had to be, or they wouldn't have survived. They made do with much less than we make do. And they created things in their spare time or with their intellectual capacity when they had a moment to look at the sky. They created things that were extremely sophisticated. And so much has been lost through ignorance and through destruction and so forth. But the little bits that we have show that these were really, really interesting people.
Now, we always, I think in the way that we maneuver the world, because of the literature that is out there, the predominant literature, that's how we shape a lot of our views. And I think I was asking a little bit earlier about rewriting of history, but also is it possible that we will see a revisioning of, or a revising of the way things are constructed in terms, even in formal education, as to what should be valued and what shouldn't be valued, you know, or what takes precedence over what. You said earlier with chapters in the history, what gets more coverage, and that seems to be the power of might, no? Where whatever is published more, then we say that is proof that this was more important. With your publication on the Maya, for example, how is that adding to the body of, you know, what is true about the Maya, and in terms of changing the ideas that we have?
Wow. I believe that we simply, well, in my own courses, I start off by saying that our history started off with Italian white guys, and that they had their prejudices, and that every culture imposes its own worldview on their education. And I want you to be aware of that. I tell my students, you know, question everything. That when you see lots and lots of emphasis given to one thing and not much given to another, why do you think that is? And it's not just because it's more important, it's because somebody with money thought it was more important, for instance. My colleagues and I, with every edition of textbooks, people try to become more politically correct, and I think that that's a very good thing. We still have a long way to go, and that's what I tell my students. Keep working.
Some people look at it, though, as you're sanitizing history and you're sanitizing information. Is it, or is it correcting some of the
It's both. We try our best, and everybody has prejudices, right? And perhaps my students would say I'm too prejudiced in the opposite direction, but I think it's important to try to reach the truth and try to get some idea of what is real as opposed to what is traditionally accepted. Would you say?
Yeah, my approach, and again, I think Victor previously put it so very succinctly, and that is, when I do research, I really, remind myself, you got to start from a very objective platform. And yes, we all have biases, and some researchers have a little more biases than others, but I try to be very objective about it. And as I go, let the research sort of direct me towards what seems to be the most accurate interpretation. I'll give you, I'm talking about rewriting history. When I was an undergraduate student, I remember, we were taught, and I'm sure Mark was there too, because he's like a whole Baktun older than I am. A Baktun is like 400 years. But anyway, we were taught that Maya civilization developed in the classic period, about in the 2nd, 3rd centuries after the birth of Christ. And since then and now, which is like 5 years ago, I was an undergraduate student.
Yeah.
But since then, we now have evidence that no, writing was already developed and being used by the Maya before the birth of Christ. Mathematics and calendrics, so in other words, they were great astronomers, knowing that there were 365-day cycle of the sun, was invented before the birth of Christ. And that they were building these magnificent, temples, that they already had cities established, they're doing trade before the birth of Christ. So in my lifetime, in my professional lifetime, which is even shorter, we have seen, the rise of Maya civilization pushed back at least 3 centuries or more.
Yeah, 4 or 5.
Yeah. So, and that's, but that's healthy, that's good, it shows that knowledge should be dynamic. When knowledge becomes static, man, we're going to go the way of the dodo.
No, and I think when the tools become available for more investigation into the history, especially, is really what makes the information that much more accessible. I think in being able to, with this particular topic and even beyond when we talk about the Mayans, in being able to have information available to any and everybody who has the least bit of interest about this issue is really what's going to help in being able to have us understand that history. When we talk about, and we're getting ready to wrap up, so I wanted to be able to, for the people out there who really believe that 2012 carries a significance and perhaps is doing their own personal preparations, who knows what else, for the end of the world. What do you say when you meet the radicals and they're, really sticking to their guns, saying, all right, it's going to happen?
Well, it depends if I want to be friends with them.
We encourage you to be friends with them.
I believe that we should all respect each other's beliefs, and it's a religious belief. This is the same thing as I have some relatives who are fervent Christians, and they're expecting the Christ to come sliding down a rainbow. And I don't want to say that. I say that in a way that sounds disrespectful. I am respectful of other people's beliefs, and the fact that some people really feel that there's going to be a physical change and we'll be sucked up to the Galactic Federation or something, I think they're going to be disappointed on December 21st, 2012. And I think that it's a time for renewal. And I think that as we get closer, as this year progresses, I've already noticed fewer people talking about Armageddon and more people talking about renewal. And I think this is an opportunity, like any great year ending or ending of a century, that we should reflect on where we're going and where we should go, and that this is like Y2K. It's a time to say, hey, look, we've come another 1,000 years.
Yeah.
Let's make the next 1,000 better.
Yeah. If I can add, again, as Mark said, when people ask me, I usually tell them, the hard believer says, if you really believe it's going to be the end of the world, then tell you what. Can you bequeath everything you own to me effective the 22nd of December? Let me inherit everything that you own. But as Maya said, that's not to poo-poo this event.
Yeah.
It was an important event to the Maya. It's the end of this great cycle, and they would celebrate it with a lot of ceremony and rituals.
I was just going to ask, how is it typically celebrated?
Yes, with a lot of, the rulers would go up there with the priests, and they would have this major ceremony. And
they'd clean things, and they'd renew things. They'd break their dishes and buy new ones. They would pray. They would stay up all night.
Yeah. And that's why in Belize, like I said, we are going to celebrate this. Starting tonight, we're going to be launching our 2012 program of events.
Right.
Mark is going to be presenting on the whole topic of 2012. So we invite people to go to the Bliss and it's going to be about 7 p.m. tonight. And then every month, the National Institute of Culture and History and the BTB, we've organized events for every month leading up to the final, which will be a great festival with a fire renewal ceremony at Cajalpech on December 21st.
Wow.
Excellent. All
We're
right.
going to be there.
It's going to be lots of fun time.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, for sitting down and talking to us about this. The final thing I wanted to ask is, when you look at history, one of the things that perhaps it's a construct of colonialism, we have these divisive kind of structures being put in place. That's Maya history, that's this history, that's, compartmentalized. How important is it for us as Belizeans to embrace Maya history as an important part of Belize, not just for the Maya, for all Belizeans?
Well, it's. I think it's important because of our incredible diversity in this country. I mean, we in Belize just take it for granted, but there are few countries in the world that have this rich tapestry of diversity and all these cultures and ethnic groups, yet we're not killing each other. We're living together. And you look at our government, I mean, you can see every ethnic group in this country. This last government, we even, for the first time, we have a representative who is from Mennonite background. Some of the more recent immigrants into our country. This is wonderful. I think Belizeans need to celebrate this diversity, and if it means learning a bit about, let's say, the African history and how Africans helped to mold who we are today, then we should all learn it. If we need to learn about how the Maya have contributed to the country of Belize, we need to learn that because we need to celebrate this diversity.
Belize could set a standard for cultural diversity being a wonderful thing.
Yeah. Excellent. Now, just as a final note, you said your book is also available online, right?
It is indeed, at markvanstone.com. You can get a digital copy much more inexpensively than this beautiful, expensive, colorful book.
All right.
All right. Well, thanks, gentlemen, for this conversation about 2012 and the countdown to December 21st, 2012.
For the party, that's it.
Thank you.